Mr. Uploads whenever the hell he feels like it. And you know what? Today we're gonna do something completely different for this channel. An unscripted, off the top of my head review of a movie I just came out of, Tmnt Mutant Mayhem. Now, one thing I've never actually gotten to show on this channel because the one time I tried, my video software crashed and I never ended up going back to the video idea, is that I am a very big fan of the Tmnt franchise. I've watched every cartoon at least once, I've watched most of the movies, and I've played as many of the games as were worth playing, let's just say. But yeah, needless to say, I was very excited about Mutant Mayhem when it was first announced, and I was even more excited when we finally saw more things about the movie after it was just a title for a pretty long amount of time. I was a fan of the designs, the style, and, well, when the trailers came out, I was a fan of those too. So, what do I think after watching this movie? I have a lot to say. So, with that said, let us begin. Right off the back, before I talk about any problems I have with this movie, let's talk about the one thing this movie shines in. The animation. The style is perfect. It legit feels like if you put, like, Kevin Eastman's art and, like, put it through a filter, gave it more detail, and just went ham on the little dingy effects. It's honestly probably, in terms of CG animation, probably the best style you could have gone for when it comes to capturing that original Turtle feel. No offense, 2012 series and 2007 movie, I still love both of you, but I think this is probably the best, or I should say, the most accurate sort of CGI style for the Turtles. I mean, I guess comparing it to 2012 ain't too fair. That was a TV show, this is a movie. One's clearly gonna get more budget, but whatever. Also, when it comes to the dynamics of the characters, this movie honestly gets the TMNT dynamic more perfect than I feel a lot of the recent adaptations have. You can tell that the brothers love spending time with each other, you can tell that they love their father but wish he was less strict. And in this movie, you can really tell their curiosity for the human world. Oh, that's another thing I also really liked about this movie. It was very interesting to see a TMNT incarnation where they were super into the human world. Like, that's kind of a thing in most of the adaptations, but how much they really care about the fact that the human world wouldn't exactly take too kindly to them is less of a focus in some adaptions, more of a focus in some other adaptions. And in some versions, it's practically non-existent, that sort of dilemma for them. But here, the Turtles love the human world and are downright devastated about the fact that they can't really be a part of it, and I thought that was actually a pretty strong point about this movie. It was strong, it was really well done, it got really emotional, and I totally bought everything the Turtles did just for their chance at acceptance. I even like how in this version, April doesn't, like, immediately, you know, be like, ah, you're Turtles, alright, we're cool. Like, it gave me whiplash going from Rise, where they literally skip over April meeting the Turtles, to in this version, being one of the only versions where she's like, honestly, the only reason I'm really accepting you guys is because you saved me. If you didn't save me, I'd be running for the hills. Also, April herself was a character I ended up really liking in this movie. And speaking of which, once again, I already said how I love the character dynamics, but I love the characters as a whole. No, seriously, I think this version is probably one of the best modernizations of the classic Turtles personalities. Leonardo's a responsible leader, but he also has a few social dilemmas, and the Turtles kinda hate just how much he's loyal to their father. And you can tell that he kind of also wishes he could be slightly less loyal, but as the leader of the group, he feels like it's his duty. Raphael is a hothead with anger issues, but because of that, he takes the most pleasure out of combat, and can somewhat come off as a little bit, I guess you could say, over-bodacious when it compared to his brothers when it comes to getting their heads into trouble. Donatello, I'd say in this movie he's probably one of the more subtle ones when it comes to his intelligence. They didn't really talk about his intelligence that much in this movie. Like, really the only part where he's, like, totally the smarter one of them is when he's kind of the one that figures out the main villain's weakness, which I won't spoil. But even that was more because they changed him to be more of a nerd than a full-on brainiac who could make 5 million machines in 2 seconds like some of his versions are. And Michelangelo's still the party dude who has the most overt fun with just being around anything of all the turtles. But I have to talk about the star of the show, and that's Splinter. Splinter in this movie is like a perfect amalgamation of a bunch of different Splinters. He has the bit of 80s Splinter where his main concern is honestly just the well-being of the turtles. He has the more fatherly outlook on things that 2012 and to a certain extent Rise Splinter had. Speaking of Rise Splinter, he's probably the one that this Splinter takes after most when it comes to the pure concept of being that old man who doesn't look like he can kick as much ass as he can, but very clearly he will kick your fucking ass, and we will definitely get to that because I want to talk about a specific scene. He also has the motivation of teaching the turtles to fight just for the sake of being able to defend themselves as 2003 Splinter. Hell, they even took after Michael Bay Splinter, kind of, with the fact that he didn't teach the turtles ninjutsu because he had Hamato Yoshi as a, master. He taught them ninjutsu because he just found some movies. That's a minor spoiler, I probably should have, shit. But yeah, no, I loved Splinter in this movie. He had so much heart to him, you could tell how much he loved the turtles, you could tell how much he just wanted the best for them regardless of anything. And you can tell that he had his reasonings for everything he did. Like, there's definitely moments in this movie where he's a little unreasonable, but in all of those moments, you could always at least see where he was coming from. The villains were also pretty good. Without spoiling anything, I'd say saying this movie has villains, plural, is kind of a stretch, but still, the crowd of mutants that we get introduced to were very entertaining, and I loved their dynamic with the turtles once everything went down. And Superfly, well, he was just entertaining. I loved every single moment he was on screen, from the funny way he talked, to his total presence, and honestly, he pulled off being comedic and intimidating. No, seriously, there were some scenes where I was kind of like, damn, this guy's intense. Speaking of intensity, while I wouldn't say this is the most PG-pushing movie I've ever seen, I will say there were definitely moments in this movie where I was just like, holy shit, what? They did that? Oh my god, wow, there's a lot of death in this movie, surprisingly. A lot of the deaths are more implied than anything else, but there's definitely some moments in this movie that'll catch you off guard. However, with that said, I do have some negatives with this movie. Now, while I overall like the humor in this movie, I will say there was definitely a little bit of, how do I say, on-the-nose pop culture references. And honestly, they kind of make the pop culture references, like, plot important. Without getting too into detail about it, they literally make Donatello's love of anime a part of the main plot. And then later, to a certain extent, they make Michelangelo make comparisons to himself and an actual real-life celebrity. And that also becomes not as important to the plot, but does become something that is kind of a part of his character. Also, the teenage lingo in this movie, look, I get it. They had actual teenagers voice the turtles, and they had the actual teenagers kind of change the lines to be more accurate to modern-day youth. But oh my god, there was a running gag about Leonardo having no riz. And when I say that, I don't mean he was bad with girls. No. I mean, like, they kept pointing out that he had no riz. Like, use the word riz, and I'm just like, okay, can we at least tone it down a teeny bit? Speaking of riz, Leonardo had a crush on April in the movie, and while that's nothing new for the TMNT series, want to get technical, they all had crushes on April in the 80s series, and we all know about Donatello's crush on April in the 2012 series. I'd say on the scale, this is less annoying than 2012 Donatello, but definitely more in your face than the 80s Turtles were about it. Like, it is low-key kind of a part of Leonardo's character this time around, and somewhat a part of his motivation for things. Also on that note, this movie had a lot of gross-out humor. Okay, fine, maybe a lot is kind of exaggerating, but there's definitely more gross-out humor than your typical TMNT production would usually have. Like, I get it, they're sewer-dwelling turtles, but oh my god. There's a running gag about vomit. They do some gross-out humor with Splinter. And the first look you get of Bebop's design is just zooming in on his hairy chest with a damn nipple ring. Also, while I wouldn't say this is a negative of the movie, the humans all look gross. Like, these humans are hypocritical. Y'all calling the mutants a bunch of freaks when all y'all faces contort like you've been smashed with like 6 sledgehammers? Like, even April kind of has, I mean, she's the most normal-looking human of the bunch, but even she's, like, not exactly too human in terms of her overall proportions, but she's still definitely the most human-looking character here. While these issues didn't overall ruin my enjoyment of the movie, I would say they definitely put a damper on it, especially with how in-your-face some of the pop culture references are. They were probably my biggest problem. But the animation, the style, the heart, it all made up for it. As a result, I'd say, if you're a Turtle fan, definitely go watch this movie. You will love it just for the dynamic of the Turtles alone. Just try to bear some of its cracks, because it does have some cracks. Other than that, I'd give this movie probably like a 7.9, 8.2 out of 10. Depends on how I feel. But yeah, that's my quick review, and by quick I mean almost like 12 minutes. Review of TMNT Mutant Mayhem. I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe I'll do more quick unscripted videos in the future for random pieces of media I consume. Make it a new series, maybe? You know, to have more content here. I'll warn you though, I'm not going to do too much for the editing. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed the movie. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.